This is a clouds weather alert.
Good late Saturday, everybody. Meteorologist Casey Cloud live here in the Weather Center right now, giving an update on our weather situation. I know we see all these warnings out toward our west, and that's kind of the idea here in terms of some of the concern that we could see locally on Sunday. I know there's 6 tornado warnings right now in Louisiana. It was 9 just a few minutes ago, just a few moments ago. As I know, we have some different updates at the bottom of the hour in terms of some of those alerts, but you can kind of see here, I zoom on in, and this is just a lot of tornado warning acts, and the red boxes indicate a radar indicated tornado warnings. The purple box means a confirmed tornado warning there. This is not too far away from Alexandria, Louisiana, and now the latest update on that box has brought that down to a radar indicated run. We don't have necessarily a debris signature with it as of the last few moments, according to the Weather Service office there, as we're looking at things there in Lake Charles, Louisiana. But I know it's about 8:30 out there, but we want to focus more on our area. But this is just an idea of, some of the accident we could be seeing here at the maximum points tomorrow. Another thing that's worth noting is we have a lot of wind dynamics here. We don't have much instability at all up here in terms of surface-based Cape and Alexandria. There's almost none. Just barely showing up here, maybe about 10 joules per kilogram here. It doesn't take much. I know as we look ahead toward that Sunday here, the models keep showing more and more of that around. At first, we didn't think there'd be much. I know we do have the cooler Gulf waters there because of all the cold air that we've had here lately, and that will help to mitigate our local risk here some as we're looking and as we're tracking things. But it's a situation here where as we're watching this scenario, there may just be such a dynamic system that at points things could still get pretty bad in our local area. But you have a couple tornado watches out there. One that's going to be going away not too long from now toward Texas, but toward Louisiana, Mississippi. We're tracking all the way out here in toward the nighttime hours to 2 a.m. Central Time. A tornado watch, meaning conditions are favorable for tornadoes and close to the watch area. Now, I do think, compared to what I said Thursday night, our threat has increased pretty substantially here in the local area. So now I do think we could end up having some local here tornado watches, maybe one, maybe two different tornado watches for portions of our area on our Sunday. So we really have to stay alert. The parameters are increasing, the wind profile's there, but now the instability profile may be getting there toward north central Florida, toward northeast Florida, toward the Big Bend of Florida. In South Georgia, we're talking more southeast and south central than southwest based on timing. In Tallahassee, it may kind of be more about the wind energy with the overall setup than the actual tape, the energy here from heating and destabilization. So we'll have to just wait and see with that. Chance maybe a little lower in Tallahassee than other places, but yeah, we're very concerned here for tomorrow now for our local area. I know just continuing to track things here very carefully. As the situation does evolve, we just have to be very much on top of this as we look here in toward that Sunday. We just have to be very vigilant here as we look at the overall meteorological scenario here. We have to just really be paying attention because of what is off toward the west. I know we just have, a lot of potential, but we also have winds out ahead, which could cause wildfire issues. Now, the rain with the actual system will help some, though, which is some good news, obviously. We need the rain very bad. We need it desperately, but we do, when we talk about a chance of a strong tornado, a small one at that even, but it's not zero, then we really, we get concerned here just overall more than maybe, just thinking, if you have just maybe an isolated severe threat, then maybe the benefits outweigh the risks. But, for most of the area, the benefits will outweigh the impact. But there'll be a few areas. Tornadoes don't have many, areas in terms of the geography. Most of you won't get hit, obviously, by a tornado. 99% of you won't, but that 1% that does could feel some pretty substantial impacts here. It could be even, something that, it's not just knocking down trees, but causing pretty significant structural damage here for that 1%, give or take, of us as we look and as we track things. So we just have to really be careful here. As the situation does move along, we just have to be, again, paying attention, being very vigilant here as we're looking. I know we have a slight risk of severe weather tomorrow. Let me show you some of that on other source. Kind of zooming on in here as we're looking at the overall scenario. This is just part of that zone, but we have that 2 out of 5 risk here, and this is an area here where I'm looking where we could, in this part of it, could have our highest chance for maybe an isolated, strong tornado that just reaches into that EF2, reading there in terms of the scale there as we're looking and as we're tracking things. I'll just pull that up real quick. When I say a strong tornado, I know you think of certain ones maybe around here, of course, toward Albany in 2017. That same day we had Adele. Those were EF3s. Now, the two that we've had in Bradford County were pretty impactful, pretty damaging back in 2020 and 2021, but those were EF1s. Those were not, that high a risk day. This is, really kind of a higher threat than we had then. But that doesn't mean you're going to get hit in Stark by any means. It can happen, though. It could be Lake Butler. It could be, Trenton. It could be Bell. It could be Alachua. It could be Live Oak. It could be Mayo. It could be Lake City. But probably most spots, going to be okay from a tornado. But one or two spots could get hit by something that could reach to about 115 miles an hour with those winds. We have to prepare you for that. We hope maybe some of those cooler Gulf waters will help. But the Storm Prediction Center and the models are saying that's not really going to happen. For the high-res models that is in regards to what I'm talking about. I know it's 60 degrees right now, and tomorrow we could get toward 80. We could get toward 80 degrees here, maybe even just above that in a few areas, which will be, problematic here. But this threat's also going to be, as we're looking up, maybe Eccles and Clint and Ware, Charlton. That's where it could be some of the highest as we get into toward areas there in Georgia a bit as we look ahead toward tomorrow, where that corridor, where the instability and the wind energy, the wind, parameters, the wind profiles really kind of interact here the greatest in terms of the overlap. So again, we just have to be very vigilant here tomorrow is what I'm saying as we're looking, as we're giving you the latest here. This 2 out of 5 risk. It's been a little while since we've had this, this is the type of risk that gets you a tornado watch. So a lot of us have that risk tomorrow. That's why you got to pay attention. You got to be very careful here as we give you guys, the latest. You got to be really paying attention to what we're talking about here with these set of circumstances as things do evolve. Just really be paying attention tomorrow. As this could be a very active day. There'll be lows, but at other points it's going to be very nasty. Now, I'm about to see the HRRR model in the 0Z that just came out a little while ago. Now, I do have some of my times. I'll have a graphic I made here a little bit later that kind of go over the times, and they're a little bit earlier, it's just a bit starting because this may be moving just a little bit faster. That's happens sometimes with these models. The storm's moving a little bit faster than what the models are indicating. So you have to keep that in mind a little bit here. And this is just one model, but there's some different things I'm going to show you with this. I know, of course, we talked about the energy was kind of lacking there. And they're still getting all these warnings, all these, even in some cases, tornado confirmations here with a, very little amount of energy, which is very concerning because we're thinking maybe that'd help us. And now that number's going up to quite a bit higher than what they're seeing. They're already seeing that. So, yeah, the wind profile will be a little bit different, but we got to really pay attention tomorrow here. Maybe, again, the cooler Gulf waters and it just being so dry can help us here some maybe. But I don't know if it's going to help us enough. We're going to have wildfire concerns out ahead of the storms. We're worried about Daytona 500. I know they moved that up an hour earlier. And let me go ahead and show you, FSU Baseball has been moved up to 11 a.m. I think the Daytona 500, as we're talking about things, that they probably able to get that in, by moving it up an hour there, starting at a little bit earlier there on that Sunday. But that FSU baseball game, unfortunately, the timing has shifted a little bit earlier for Tallahassee here from what we were talking about earlier on. And even though they shifted the game for that first pitch at 11 a.m. against DMU Game 3, I'm not sure that that's going to be early enough. Probably going to have to just have maybe a little bit of a start if they can get a little in and then have a stop for a while and then finish back after the storms are over. So, that's just kind of how it's looking right now, unfortunately, is that threat. In terms of the game impacts, the timing, things that moved a little earlier than what we were talking about Thursday night. But you see this area here. I know we have the current alerts up, but these are the wind arrows. Look at that spin there. That's your spin, your low pressure there in central and, west central Mississippi there on that Sunday. You don't normally have that spin that water fine. We're having really low pressure with this too. As I know, I'm moving our model around some, back and forth and the like, but what I want to do here, I want to pull up, I took it off because the other day because it's a little confusing if and a little bit busy, but this is going to be your low pressure. You see, that's about 1,000 millibar low. It's a pretty far south too. So, that's similar. We have this in severe weather season. But sometimes they're not this close, and then that means we have a little pressure here overall than what you'd have otherwise. Closer to the coast, more of that wind energy here. You just have a scenario here that's equivalent to a tropical storm. In terms of that pressure, we can have that. That's how we have a lot of weather makers, winter weather, severe weather, and the like around here. But just the placement of that's a little concerning. And then we have this timing out this Rome where we could peak at the right instability, the wrong instability, really. So yeah, you have some of these green wind arrows, which indicates sustained winds of at least 15. But I'm gonna see in a minute how we could even have gusts, as high as 45 miles an hour here out ahead of storms tomorrow, which could, if there's wildfires around, could help to spread some of that out ahead of the axis here, the storm axis, that is. So it's gonna be a very busy day. This is 10 a.m. on the latest or 1Z run of H4. But let me back this up a little bit because this is the 0Z. It goes a lot further out, so I can take you all the way through this here. And you'll be able to see this is, as we're looking at things, this is the presentation, the forecast for 16Z, which is 11 a.m. You see some stuff there in southwest Georgia as we're looking towards Seminole and Miller counties there, for instance. Maybe already getting some warnings over there at 11 a.m. And then as you're looking, you already see maybe some of that approaching Gadsden County, and by noon, that's starting to move into Tallahassee already. So yeah, that FAC baseball game is not looking like, that 11 a.m. unfortunately is going to be early enough. Maybe if you started out at 9 a.m., well, that's really, really early, but they did softball like that last week. That might be the way you can get this in before the storms, really move in there, especially if it's like a 7-inning game like it was today there. I know UF actually ended up pretty early on moving their games, up here in terms of having a doubleheader today. They won 2 out of 3 this weekend. FSU's won their first 2 in college baseball. But as you're looking here, this is noon tomorrow here. Noon there, Albany. You can see this is coming right through the Hardy County there. You also have areas there around Bainbridge, and then getting there closer toward the Cairo area there as well. And Thomasville's not too far off from that. That is at noon here. Could have severe weather. Damaging winds, especially a little bit further north, maybe a little bit more likely than tornadic activity. But we'll see. We'll just have to wait and see with this. Technically, and just based on how, tornadoes are, damaging winds would be more likely for everybody than a tornado. But my point being is, it may have more of those type of warnings further north, but we'll just have to wait and see because it could be a little more unstable to the south here with the overall energy, with the storm, energy that is available, unfortunately, here. Let me put up a look at some of that energy, and this doesn't look like a lot. On here is not a lot, sure, but it's more than what, in some ways, in terms of that surface base cape, at least, what they're seeing right now out toward the west. I know there's different ways to look at this, don't get me wrong, but, really seeing any of this blue come on in here, you don't really, it's, enough energy to be prevalent, in terms of presenting a severe risk here and being problematic. And, as we warm up, if we warm up more than what it's saying, here, and it's getting us out to, it's getting us to some reds here, so that's close to 80. We'll have to just watch it here in the model. There's other ways to look at it. I look at it on another source. Sometimes it can actually be a little easier to see some of this on a different source here, but we're just going to kind of look at the energy real quick. You see some of the yellows popping up here at points. Yeah, not what you want to see, obviously, as we're looking and as we're tracking things of the overall meteorology as the situation does transpire. I know we just have to be really paying attention. That's enough to be a problem here for us. I know some of that will be surface-based as we're looking ahead. I know right now I don't have any surface-based. Looking at some of these others here, we have a little bit, but yeah, it could be more than what they're getting out there, and they're getting tornado warnings. Again, the wind fields will be a little different, but the point being is we just have to be careful here with this tomorrow. We don't have anything on the radar right now, but let me go ahead and we're just going between some different things here. Let me go ahead and switch back on over to some different things here with the meteorology and with the forecast for tomorrow. I know it's just some different things I've been looking at here. Let me just go straight back to the model and kind of break this down here a little bit more straightforward for you. So Let me go back here toward 1 o'clock so you can see around Tallahassee here. Leon County, this could be, a severe thunderstorm situation, or even there could be tornado warnings, kind of with this line that points out there. It's not out of the question, but yeah, definitely, gonna have some lighting around when thunder roars go indoors, obviously. So that, doesn't look good for the FSU baseball game there. And you can see areas down toward the coast here in Wakulla County. Crawfordville, moving in toward that area about 1 o'clock, give or take. Again, this may be a little later than what Roy ends up happening. I have a graphic with the times here and a little bit that I, handcrafted for you guys, and I'll go over that. But, Thomasville, maybe around 1 o'clock, give or take. Moultrie there, Tifton. This is where we could have this moving in at 1 o'clock here, and then we could have more destabilization. This could re-strengthen the line here as we look ahead. So let me go ahead and progress this here. That's 2 o'clock. That's 3 o'clock here. I know we could start to have more of the, overall mixture between the wind energy and the storm energy, the convective upheaval potential energy come together here, and that could be a problem. We'll be watching from Homerville, Valdosta, Live Oak, Mayo, Perry. This is at about 3 o'clock, give or take. I think this may be a little late. I think it could be a little earlier than this, so keep that in mind. 4 o'clock here, as we're looking, this is this one model. I'm looking at all the other model guidance here in the Weather Center. Just keep in mind that sometimes this is a little slower than what ends up happening. So this is at 4 o'clock here. The model is, in terms of what I'm referring to, but as we're giving you guys the very latest here, looking at everything. This here is at 4 p.m. You see Hamilton County, Suwannee County, Columbia, Mayo, still with some of this, leading edges, we'd have a more likely chance for severe, but you could end up, setting up here at points just within this area. This kind of shows some, the accent that at points. And when I say leading edge, let me rephrase that a little. Let me back it up a little bit, because what I'm saying about that here is some of the greens and even some of these yellows, that is not, that's something that won't even show maybe this bright on radar tomorrow. It's really the leading edge of the intense activity is what I'm saying, where you could have your severe threat when, it's you have to see it tomorrow to see what I mean. We haven't dealt with this too much lately, but, or if you watched before, you'll probably know what I'm talking about. But as we're looking here, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock here, again, I think this is going to be a little bit earlier than this, so I have a graphic. In fact, let me just go to that now. But here, I'm going to go through this a little bit more, but you see Jacksonville, Ocala, St. Augustine, Palm Coast. But let me get that graphic. I'm going to show it again later, but just so I can avoid maybe, you guys getting confused. This is going to be my forecast for time, and that's a model. But this right here on the graphic is what I have for the timing here. So I have 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. for Southwest Georgia, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. for Tallahassee, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. for Valdosta. And then as you look down toward the Suwannee River Valley, I have 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. Gainesville and Brunswick are 2 to 6. Jacksonville's 3 to 7. The most likely time for greatest concern is severe weather and or even a tornado risk. And then Palm Coast is 4 to 8. But really, when you're into peak heating after 6:30, after the sun goes down, that'll start to wane some. You kind of have to focus on the times that are closer to peak heating, and then when the wind energy matches up the best here, the wind profiles, and that looks to be the Suwannee River Valley, maybe out to about Perry and Madison, through Lake City, and then, through Gainesville there further into north central Florida, all the way through McClenny there and the like, and even into Charlton County, maybe Eccles County there, something like that. That's where we could, if we get a strong tornado, something that really causes pretty bad damage, that could destroy mobile homes even, in an isolated nature, very isolated strip. Don't know where it'll be. If that happens, it'd be more likely in that area here from about Perry over through about Stark, right where we're at, that corridor all the way up through McClenny and toward about Folkestone area, somewhere there. If you can kind of imagine what I'm talking about there in that corridor, just a little bit here, we're looking at the models, we're looking at the information. This is a hyper-local look at this, so 2 to 6 p.m. for Stark, so a little earlier than what that model guidance was showing here. You have 2 to 6 p.m. for Gainesville, 1 to 5 p.m. for Lake City. So in that time frame, that's where we're most likely to have tornado warnings here on play, especially where I have the yellow, highlighted boxes above the names here. That's where I think we'd have the best chance for a tornado risk here. That does also include areas out toward Live Oak and out toward Perry there as well, not on this map, but just as you kind of think of that, it includes areas up toward like Charlton County, Eccles County there in Georgia, and the like. So Clinch County, you kind of get the idea here. We're really trying to narrow this down, but it also could include Mayo, down toward about, Gilchrist County, Dixie County, Levy County, even not out of the question with some of this, kind of overlap. It's not a guarantee it's going to happen there, but that's where it'd be most likely. We don't have a hatched area yet from the Storm Prediction Center, which indicates higher confidence in a strong tornado potential. But if that were to be added to the map with the overnight update, that's kind of where I would be thinking it would go. I can't guarantee that's going to happen, or that's where it would be if that happened. But they may not end up doing that. I'm just saying if they do have a hatched area, that's where that would be. It's not often we get that around here, so there may be just a little bit, too low of confidence in this because of the Gulf being so cool, which could limit the energy, and the models could be overdoing their projections some based on, thinking that, maybe things aren't, just it's not taken into account enough. The Gulf waters being so cold because of all the cold weather we've had, which limits instability, which limits destabilization here as we're looking and as we're tracking things. So again, be paying attention here on that Sunday as we look at things, as we track things here in the Weather Center. It's very important to stay vigilant here with these inclement conditions as we're, giving you the latest. Now let me go ahead and zoom out here. I'm going to pull up the current radar again. We currently have 4 tornado warnings out here toward Louisiana. I know it's 8:51 out there, but just so folks know, watching locally what time it is, but, out there in Louisiana, there's a tornado warning around the Colfax community, Grant Paris to 9:30 Central Time. We also have areas there southwest of Alexandria. We have a tornado warning for Rapides Paris there at 9 o'clock. These are all currently red or indicated with the red boxes versus the purples, but we also have Rapides, Vandalin, Vernon, and Allen parishes until 9:15 Central Time with tornado warning. And then Lake Charles, they got hit so bad by Hurricane Laura going back a while ago there, about 5 years ago or so now. But Cameron and Calcasieu parishes under a tornado warning for red or indicated rotation until 9 o'clock Central Time. So I know it's just always very important to take, the tornado safety tips into account, and they will be for our area tomorrow as well. I know area-wide isolated threat on Sunday, but a strong, this is, pretty big departure. I was thinking more our western area, and sure they might be, seeing it a little bit higher, and it kind of fades some for a while, and then it really picks back up as we get toward Perry, and as we get toward areas there like Live Oak, Madison, give or take. The threat's now expected to re-intensify here on us in terms of that line, and in terms of the action associated with the convection here. So again, we need to be very careful. Again, a strong EF2 plus tornado, winds of around 115 miles an hour, can't be ruled out. I doubt it'd be much higher than that. That's really, I was honestly, I saw some model upticks last night. I posted about it, but I was surprised that they mentioned the wording about strong tornado, and they're keeping that in there. It is definitely seen in the modeling that the HRR are definitely indicating that potential out of word like Live Oak, give or take, tomorrow. Or even up into, Charlton County, Georgia, across to even Columbia County here in Florida. So yeah, it's definitely a possibility. It's just how much will the cool conditions we have with those cooler than normal Gulf waters impact our severe threat? That's a big question. We don't generally have this big of a departure, and we're still in La Nina here instead of El Nino, which make it more favorable. And in history, that type of global type of setup here between some different things here going on will make it more favorable here. We'll have El Nino to get tornadic activity than some, conditions here like what we have in La Nina. So again, La Nina is more for hurricanes. I know we have been in there. We had that terrible hurricane there hurricane, course down toward Jamaica as we were looking and as we were tracking things of Hurricane Melissa last year, and we're switching to El Nino, which is more for severe weather. But when we're in La Nina, that can sometimes we don't have the hurricanes keep you dry, and that's what we're seeing here. I know we had that in 2012, where we were dry, and then we had all those tropical systems, weaker ones, Debbie, and then even before that we had Beryl that kind of, got us, out of that. Debbie especially, that was a blood mess there, the 2012 version of Debbie. So tomorrow, this is what you got to keep in mind. Tornado watch means conditions favorable for tornadic activity. The other day I thought maybe not getting that, maybe just our western areas. Now I think we'll have one, if not two, different tornado watches. Maybe one, for the western areas and another one for the rest of the area later on. There's a chance we could have that, we might not have one for a little while in there. Things fade before they re-energize here, reorganize here as we look toward our Swanee River Valley. So, and it is Valentine's Day. I hope you've had a happy Valentine's Day, but tomorrow we got to really pay attention. We got to stay alert. Most of us, obviously, the way tornadoes are, you're not going to get hit by them, but a few of us, in our area could, and they could even be, not just a quick spin up. They could be a little bit more defined even. I know, not saying it's going to be like this, but of course we've had, bad tornadoes a couple times in Columbia County, but the last 20-ish, maybe a little more than that, give or take, about 20 years ago, both of them were around Columbia County. So we just got to pay attention here. We just got to pay attention as we're looking here in the scenario, when there's a tornado warning in play. A tornado is detected using radar or spotted. You want to try to avoid taking shelter in a mobile home. Get inside a sturdy building. Put as many walls between you and the outside as possible. And protect yourself from flying debris by putting on a bicycle, baseball, or football helmet. Just want to have your shoes on so you don't cut your feet up. And also, if we get supercellular development, we could also have some hail evolving too, something we haven't had around here in a while. So remain alert for that potential here as well. Could be, an inch in size, give or take. So be watching for that, obviously. Again, giving you guys the latest with all that. Let me see if there are any questions or comments here. I'm going to check our sources. Just bear with me. Give me just a moment here. Just a one-man band, of course, here trying to give you guys the very latest on the situation here. I see Top Cat Ann watching there on YouTube. I appreciate you tuning in. I appreciate other viewers tuning in on the various platforms, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch here as we're getting you guys up to date. Getting you guys alerted for your Sunday severe weather potential in the local area. Talking about Stark here, talking about Lake City, talking about Lake Butler, talking about Live Oak, talking about Trenton, Bell, Gainesville, just everybody in there all the way up through Eccles County. So we're talking about areas there, in Clinch County as well. We're talking about Homerville. So again, you just have to be really, really careful here tomorrow as we're looking Charlton County. Just be very vigilant here. Most of you won't get hit, obviously, by, the nature of how tornadoes are, but there could be a few spots that get some nasty damage. So, you just really got to pay attention. We're going to have the rain for everybody. Had 90% the other day. It's now 100%. I don't have a graphic showing that. We're also in alert mode now, but, we're now at 100% chance of rain for your Sunday for our entire area. North Florida and South Georgia here as we're looking and as we're tracking things. So, again, really be vigilant here with this. Again, continuing to keep you guys updated on all this here in the Ward the Weather Center. It's very important to be paying attention. I know there is now, an update with some of the stuff in Louisiana, so let me go ahead and jump back on over there. As we're giving you guys the latest, there's now a confirmed tornado warning here. Allen, Vandalin, and Rapides, Paris. There's a confirmed tornado near Glenmora, moving east at 45 miles an hour. So this is an 858 Central watching this. Let me go ahead and switch on over here to another mode. I'm going to try to go ahead and load that radar on in here so we can kind of get an idea of what's going on here as we're looking off the Fort Polk radar there in Louisiana. And sometimes along the line is a little harder to pick out, so just going to try to, we're doing this on the fly, so going to try to kind of give you an idea of what we're talking about here. Just looking at our system, I'm going to go ahead and pull things on up so we can try to pick this out here together. Again, this is what makes things so tricky sometimes. Along these lines, you get these quick spin-ups that are not the easiest to see in terms of tornado debris signature. You have to kind of scrub if you're not watching every frame. You have to scrub back and forth a few times here. I know something up to the north there, but I'm not sure that was necessarily yet. As we're looking, we haven't had much of this lately, so just really have to be careful here. Let me see what the other information was they gave. They said, yeah, near Glenmore. Okay, so I was hoping they'd give another descriptor, how many miles from another town, but maybe it's in there, right around here if you get really tight with that. Yeah, maybe you're right in there, somewhere right around town there, unfortunately, give or take. But, that would indicate, if I'm having trouble picking it out, it's probably, a weaker tornado. But, some of these could get a debris signature so quick by the time they, update the polygon, it's already off the ground. So that's something they're watching there in central Louisiana. And then, towards southern Louisiana, Lake Charles with a tornado warning as well. Alexandria is under a tornado warning. By the time we get a debris signature, might be, too late because it'll be already causing damage. If we get one that's clear enough to get this to turn to a purple pinkish box, you just have to go ahead and take your precautions here. The pink means confirmed tornadoes. Well, I'm saying that, but if you get a debris signature, that means we're already getting damage. So take tornado precautions. Are in Alexandria, Louisiana. It's 9 o'clock Central Time over that way. As we're looking, and you see your risk for tomorrow out to the east. That's what I have up on the map here. Like Charles, Louisiana, also parts of Calcasieu Parish there. With that, let me change that risk to today's. I just had that up. Actually, let me just take that off altogether. But let's just go ahead and look here at Lake Charles, though. You can kind of see some spin right near the radar site there, right there at it. In fact, we do have, different readings that come out of there. And that's your temperature. That's right near Lake Charles Regional Airport. They have 66 degrees of temperature. And the winds there, oh, wow. Let me put that on the screen. It says we just had a gust of 72, even higher than our temperature number. That's not good. Let me pull that up. Oh, my goodness. That's damaging winds there, right in Lake Charles. That's, you see it. Whether they got hit by a tornado or not. I mean, these are type of winds that can really knock out a lot of power there. And, it could be indicative of what we see tomorrow. Now, the wind field will be a little different tomorrow, but the energy could be higher. So, we could have something kind of similar in some ways in our area tomorrow. We shall see. Not necessarily, worse overall in terms of the overall, conglomeration of severe and tornado warnings. But, we'll just have to really be vigilant here as we're tracking. That's pretty impressive and not in a good way to get a gust of almost hurricane force there right now around Lake Charles. That's a confirmed gust at the airport there recently. So, again, I'm moving toward Hays, Louisiana there right now as we're looking at some of the different parishes there in that state. So it's 9:02 Central Time there, 10:02 Eastern, where we're doing this update from. And our local areas of focus here as we're looking and as we're tracking things. And we're going to have to watch that wildfire threat here as we're looking at things for tomorrow because of the winds picking up out ahead here of, the line. And that's something we're going to talk about more here with in about 60 seconds. So keep it tuned here on Cloud Weather. We're going to talk more about our potential in about 60 seconds. So just stay with me here. Just going to take a quick 60-second break here. And I'll be right back with more information here from the Weather Center as I continue to look and track things here. It's just so important to be vigilant here tomorrow for quite a few different reasons. You see some of the signs of what's headed our way already here on the Doppler. See you here in 60 seconds. In the last half decade or so, our area and the region have been through a lot. Stay safe, but it's going to be memorable. I was there around 4 p.m. to document them. Life-threatening situation here. So, again, that's the storyline there. Oh, I think we just had another power flash. Another power flash. Sometimes Bradford County is a tough spot to see a spin-up tornadoes, so we just want you to go ahead and be inside and away from windows. Can't even completely run a quick spin-up tornado, so things have started to escalate here. Please take shelter. This is going to cause a lot of damage. Radar-confirmed tornado in southeastern Georgia. We're seeing areas there around Perry. Bear the brunt of this coming into these communities and ravaging them. That's what we got to get you guys out. You got to run from that water. You got to evacuate. You got to follow these orders. This is as serious of a situation I've seen. This is the eye wall. This is where some of the worst of the weather is. When hazardous weather threatens, trust Clouds Weather. Meteorologist Casey Cloud back with you now. You can see here tomorrow we have a wind advisory in play, and we're talking about from noon until 6 p.m. on that Sunday. Southwest winds there, 15 to 25 miles an hour with gusts up to 45 miles an hour. And the thing about this, I made sure to add this in here and underline it. That's expected outside of storms, and that's the problem ahead of storms, even, especially. Now, this time frame, is where we could have the peak of all this kind of coming together. They might add a little bit further east with some of these counties based on this stuff if it moves in a little earlier here, because, when you get in the afternoon, that can help. We start to, kind of get the winds increased then and that type of setup. So it's a combination of different things here that are coming together meteorologically here. That could get expanded toward the coastal counties here as well, the first coast we shall see. But you just got to be careful because you got to make sure those outdoor objects are secure, but then active wildfires are likely to have increasing spread rates. Even, if something sparks, it could really, be an evacuation situation really fast. So have to stay vigilant. Stay tuned to your community level alerts here for that, of course. We'll be on for tornado warnings, if it's thunderstorm warnings, if there's a really big wildfire situation, we'll try to cover it as quick as we can here. But we have to focus on the active severe warnings coming from the Weather Service offices, obviously, because that's our focus. Again, across the 62 counties, you see these yellow, highlighted / underlined counties here. That's where we have our greatest threat here for the wind, advisory type of criteria conditions being met on that Sunday, where active wildfires are likely to have increasing spread rates. And as we go ahead here and see the drought monitor now, we said this the other day, but it's very bad, very bad picture, extreme drought. We will have some rain tomorrow, which is going to help with that some. It's not going to be drought busting, but it's going to help some here as we're looking and tracking things. But just be, alert. If we have something evolve here, you may have to evacuate very quickly. These are tips from California from last year, and some of this doesn't apply here. So you see the terrain. We don't have that around here for the most part, really anything like that. But just make sure if you get an evacuation recommendation by fire officials, you need to leave it as soon as possible to avoid being caught in fire, smoke, or road congestion. You have, of course, air quality concerns and the like here. Just take the initiative to stay informed and aware and listen to your radio, TV, or alerts on your phone here for announcements from law enforcement and emergency personnel. Make sure you have that emergency kit, in your vehicle there, and then just, be thinking about items you need to take with you, important documents and the like, in case you have to evacuate at a moment's notice. That's the wildfire threat, not, wind tornado threat, of course. Sadly, a few homes, if they get major tornado damage tomorrow, people have to stay elsewhere for a while potentially. But that's, something that will be isolated in nature. But it's definitely possible within our area tomorrow. We saw it. I know in Bradford County in 2020 and 2021, and tomorrow's risk generally is higher than both of those days. But that doesn't mean it'll happen in Bradford County. It might happen in Union. It might happen in Columbia, Suwannee County, something like that. Hamilton County. You don't know. You can't forecast that quick in terms of the tornado potential, but the drought is an issue here. It could happen with severe weather in Georgia, but the fire and the wind, potential out ahead of the storms is something we're watching as well. So again, we're in alert mode with all this. You have extreme drought there in Georgia, but then the tornado safety tips. Again, area-wide isolated threat on Sunday. A strong EF2 plus tornado cannot be ruled out. Stay tuned for the latest updates if you have a tornado watch, but just do that anyway. Charge your devices tonight if you can, in case some folks do lose power. Forget those winds like what they're seeing in Louisiana and some spots a little more widespread than what tornado damage would be. If we get that type of wind, you don't want to be without, communication methods because your phone battery died. Something like that. So make sure you just charge your devices up tonight if you can. Have multiple ways to receive alerts. If a tornado warning issued, that means a tornado's been detected using radar or spotted. Try to avoid taking shelter in a mobile home. Those, those are sometimes, especially just the way they're, are built there, and just the way, sometimes the wind can get under them. That makes them a little bit, a little bit more risky sometimes than the site-built structures. Just get inside a sturdy building, put as many walls between you and the outside as possible, and protect yourself from flying debris by putting on a bicycle, baseball, or football helmet here as we're tracking things. And then this is another graphic I want to show now. This isn't the, just the one factor that's going to decide everything, because you have wind parameters here as well. If we have more of that to the west and not as much to the east, and it doesn't mean, that it's possible our western counties could end up getting it worse, but in terms of the instability, the highest end potential, if you get the overlap, and then you have Live Oak, you have Valdosta to some degree. Valdosta, we'll be watching. Maybe this a little east to be a little warmer though in Georgia. But yeah, Gainesville, Jacksonville, Palm Coast getting to 80. The storms, especially for like Palm Coast, maybe a little bit later away from the peak heating. But timing right at peak heating to where Gainesville, Jacksonville could be an issue, especially Gainesville. And Brunswick there, we're going to be watching, we're going to be tracking here as well, but there may not be quite as much of an overlap up there with the favorable parameters. But as you see here, and that's very warm compared to what we've been seeing. But again, reminding you guys of when this is most likely, to be the greatest concern for you, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Southwest Georgia, including Albany, including Moultrie there, and then you have 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. toward Tallahassee. As we're looking, that's a little earlier than what Dave's Triple I was showing, but you had, the model one I was showing you a moment ago here earlier on in our update, but 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. for Valdosta, somewhere within this range. It's not going to be the whole 4 hours necessarily, but this at some point within this time frame is the most likely time to be either let me back up, under either a severe thunderstorm and or tornado warning. That's most likely to occur during this time frame, these 4 to 5 hour intervals here. So again, 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. toward the Swanee River Valley in general. And on the other graphic, so it's a little bit, starts a little later for Lake City, but Gainesville, 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. there. You have Jacksonville, 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. Brunswick there, they're more in line with the Gainesville timing. They're threat maybe just a little less than Gainesville. We'll see. Again, we'll have to see how it sets up because the models and the forecast are a little off. It could just, these areas I've highlighted for the greater tornado threat here. That's what I have the, areas, the boxes highlighted for that could shift west, east, north, south a little. We'll see. But, 4 to 8 p.m. for Palm Coast there. Flagler County, the Daytona 500 should get in. Down there, they should be able to get that in tomorrow, moving it up an hour. But let's look at that real quick at the model. I'm going to go back to H-triple-R, and of course, this may be about an hour behind, give or take. But I'm going to try to pull this one up here again on my other source. So we're going to focus on that area. It's not in our covered area, but a lot of folks from our area are probably going down there, already down there for that, big race there, the Great American Race there tomorrow, as we're looking toward Volusia County. So let me go ahead and switch back on over here. This is the forecast modeling on the H-triple-R for 6 p.m. The race would, in theory, be over by then. I'll back it up. We don't have as much of the passing showers, but if you have any of those come through, this is 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. That could delay things some, and then you could end up having to meet up with this, which is coming in there at 8 o'clock. Traveling back, you would run into it at some point if you're traveling back tomorrow toward our area here. This is the presentation for 8, but this might be 7 o'clock here. Let's see another model here, the NAM. It's showing a little bit different type of scenario here. I don't, especially once we get an H-triple-R range, I don't like to use the NAM as much. I haven't really looked at this too much here. But it is a high-res model that I can see in this system. It says it a little bit later, even really 10 o'clock or something, trying to come in. Let's see, this a little bit lower resolution NAM. You can kind of see here. That's coming in, that's like, I say 10 p.m. Then you have the GFS here, which really has a weaker by 10. That's 7 o'clock. That's 4 o'clock here. As we're looking again on a setup like this, the high-res H-triple-R should be about your best, option here. There's some other ones that I can't say you guys that, are used that are really helpful in the meteorology community, but let's just give you an idea. This is 9 a.m., 10 a.m., 11, noon, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 p.m., 5 p.m., 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 8 p.m., 9 p.m., 10 p.m. there on that. A little bit lower down toward Tampa. Not 0, but a little bit lower down there. Let's see if it was Orlando, Tampa. But, as we're looking down there, as, later on past sunset, we didn't have much of the favorable conditions setting up. But, we have all these warnings out there right now toward Louisiana. And let me go ahead and give you another look at that here. Focusing over there. You have a lot of damage reports showing up now. Around the Ritter, we have reported trees down and power outages. You have trees down across roads there in the Rapides Parish area around the community of Union Hill. So it gives you an idea of what's going on. And then we had that gustum hurricane force at Lake Charles Airport recently. And in terms of power outages, I'm going to pull that up from my other source here right now to look. Bear with me. We have 47,000 or some, it's 48,000 out in Texas according to Power.us right now. Louisiana's over 16,000 customers in the dark. So not what you want to, see, obviously. And those numbers are just going to keep going up in Louisiana, I'm sure. Texas, they might start going down as restoration occurs. But those are pretty hefty numbers. Some of these areas here in Louisiana, especially around Monroe, they had an ice storm, and any type of wind could knock down trees. And we still had, power outages 3 weeks in, holding on in parts of northern Mississippi. So even rain there. I know it's a lot warmer now. We've had a handful of them 3 weeks, duration. Power outages up there, just awful from the aftermath of the historic deadly ice storm we had there going back into January. But as we go ahead and just look here at these, again, red means radar indicated, pink means confirmed at one point, though. That is now a radar indicated one as well, but that's the 6 tornado warnings here at this current time, which is 9:14 Central Time. But moving toward Jennings, Louisiana, we have this radar indicated tornado warning in the community of Iowa, community of Hayes. In Louisiana, we have this warning. We got some updates, so we're down to 5 now as of 9:15 Central. But you have areas there, Eunice, Oberlin there in Louisiana. You have Bunkie and Marksville, Louisiana, Alexandria, of course, some more populated area. We have some of that vegetation moving around there. You have a tornado warning to the north of that as well. So again, quite a bit of that activity there. I know. Let me take the clock up just for a moment. People watching out west, you're not getting confused. Seeing this here because you're an hour earlier, of course, but. Let me go ahead and see you around Hayes, Louisiana. You see some of this yellow, which indicates we already had a wind right at the airport. And so these are 70, 80-mile-an-hour winds moving right into Hayes, Louisiana. Expect widespread, power outages in that community. I would think there, if it's not straight line winds, it could be an actual tornado coming through there. But at least from the straight line wind potential there. So. As we're looking, as we're tracking, that's, something that is, very much worth noting there right now. That's a small community there, population, a little less than 1,000 maybe as of the 2010 census. Coming up on a quick search there, but, moving right in right now there. And as you look, we move this up here. You have areas here further up. You have this tornado warning here, Oberlin. Some of these different communities in Louisiana, Bunkie there, Louisiana. Again, this is a sign of what's coming our way into Alexandria, of course. That's Rapides, Paris. I need to switch to the Polk radar. And you watch some of these alerts. You have the one right over Alexandria right now. We have some radar indicated rotation right in that metro area there in central Louisiana. And then you can kind of see there, watching that warning goes into play until 9:45 Central. At 8:57 Central, the severe thunderstorm was capable of producing a tornado at that point near Elmer, and that's for Voiles and Rapides, Paris is there in central Louisiana until 9:45. So something that those folks are looking at there, and follow your local meteorologists, both broadcast and digitally there, in some of these different areas on digital and on broadcast here, follow along with some of these type of situations here as we're looking off toward the west. So, as a local meteorologist handling this type of situation out there, like what I'll be doing here for our local area tomorrow here as we're looking and as we're tracking things. So, again, let me go ahead and pull back over to the graphics. You can kind of see what we're talking about here with the timing for our area. Remain vigilant, remain alert for rapidly changing conditions here, obviously. I just have to be really careful here. We're going to be giving you the latest on all the different platforms. Facebook, KC Cloud WX, Facebook Cloud Weather, Twitter /X at Cloud KC, YouTube at Cloud Weather, Twitch Cloud Weather, cloudweather.com. That has all the different links available, including interactive radar. I know you can look at some of the storms out west over there. You can also go to NWS Tornado on Twitter there. That gives you a lot of the different alerts in terms of the tornado warnings. We had some around Houston area earlier on. I know, some of those storms moving through there in southeast Texas. I had some action there with warnings around Longview as well. But as we go ahead and look here, again, 2 to 6 p.m. is the most likely time for greatest concern around Stark. And we have it highlighted in the yellow, which this could change some. This is based on what I'm seeing, the overlap of the parameters. Because in theory, we could have a low wind like EF2, which would technically be barely a strong tornado. Remember what we had in 2020 and 2021 weren't technically even strong tornadoes. They were both EF1s on the scale. I believe one, looking back recently, had 105 mile an hour winds, another 95 mile an hour winds. So again, it's kind of important to keep in mind there as we're looking and as we're tracking things with that, of course. So again, just kind of looking through that scale. But in theory, not saying it's going to happen. There's a good chance it won't happen. But somewhere in our area tomorrow, the thought process is we could barely get an EF2 tornado, which is very, serious. And when I say barely, I'm just saying that scientifically more than anything. But, that would be considerable damage producing. Could even get one of those PDS tornado warnings. Hopefully not, but it's not out of the, realm of possibilities here in this type of setup. So we have to stay vigilant on this 15th of February, 2026. I know back in 2000 there, they had, some very bad and violent tornadoes really in the overnight hours there that, caused, so much damage, destruction, fatalities there in southwest Georgia there. It was 26 years ago this morning on Valentine's Day morning 2000. So this is the time of year you can have these higher end type tornadoes in this part of the country. So even though we do have the cooler Gulf waters, which I keep mentioning, that hopefully will help, push things a little bit lower than what the models are indicating. If the system's just so dynamic, it may kind of override some of that, and then we could just have some, pretty significant damage in a spot or two. So again, you just have to really pay attention here tomorrow on this Sunday, staying alert and remaining alert for these rapidly changing weather conditions. And now looking at the rainfall forecast, we do need the rain, and this is mainly all for tomorrow for our local area. We're talking about some of these patches here, about 1.25 inches even popping up there, north central Florida, and you see a lot of inch numbers, give or take North Florida, a little bit of southeast Georgia, a little less, maybe like 1/2 to 3/4, and then a little bit of northeast Florida, 1/2 to 3/4, which wouldn't be as beneficial, obviously. But we'll take anything we can get. We just don't want the winds out ahead because it cause fire concerns. We don't want the severe weather here either that we're expecting to get now, that increasing potential of that here as we're looking and as we're tracking things here in toward the weather center. So yeah, we got to really pay attention here. Not really expecting flash flooding unless it's in an urban area, but here tomorrow, because it's not going to be that much rain. But it's still something where we're going to be really just hoping we can get as much as we can get here out of this, squeeze as much as we can out of this before we don't have another rain chance much for maybe over a week after tomorrow, give or take. So again, the events, of course, we hate seeing those impacted, but we have to have the rain more. But we don't want tornadic activity, that is for sure, because that can be, just really bad for some folks here. It'll be isolated, but it could happen in our local area in north central Florida tomorrow on your Sunday, on that February 15th, 2026. So please remain vigilant. Please remain alert. As I go ahead and show you something else here, this is our covered area. You can see here we're watching our different regions. We're always on for the 62 counties. I'm in Bradford County. Here we're at 59 degrees right now. We're watching the dew point values and the like. It's a 54 right now. We're seeing how much of the overlaps we can get with the wrong, or maybe, better luck, right parameters, because it would just be great if we could get the rain without lightning, without, severe weather. But we're probably going to at least have lightning for sure. You'll hear rumbles of thunder for most spots tomorrow. But how much severe weather do we get? That's still a question. But lightning, one thing I will say about this, the lack of energy, even though we have a lot of the wind parameters, we have 6 tornado warnings out west. I don't see as much lightning on here, at least from the broad view. Let me switch back over to this again, out toward Louisiana, because this can be an indicator. There's a handful, but sometimes this would show up more than this here on the mapping. So that's at least, it's still enough to cause problems. It's just, and we could have more energy than that, but I'm a little surprised we're not seeing more lightning than that. But that's still a pretty good bit there, unfortunately, as we're watching that thunderstorm potential here. 6 tornado warnings, though, right now in Louisiana. The bigger story out of all that here is of 9:23 Central Time. So, again, we're watching that. We're also watching the small fog threads. We look ahead towards early Sunday here locally. So just make sure you're slowing down and give yourself extra time there to reach your destination. Watch out for any fog and smoke that could, interact here, and that could, really be more of a, hazardous situation in a few areas on the roads, and had a problem in Putnam lately like that. And then as we're looking here to make sure your vehicle is visible as visible as possible to other vehicles by using your low beam headlights, and leave plenty of room between you and the vehicle in front of you. So again, very important here to keep in mind. Very important here to keep in mind for sure as we're looking and as we're tracking things, as we're giving you guys the latest updates here on the overall meteorological set of circumstances here that, are headed our way. As you can see here, we're watching that off toward the west. We're looking at some of the supercell composite values, which are pretty impressive. A 5 right there near, the coast there. That's pretty high up. STPs, and if it converted parameters over a 1, and we could get some of that here locally, in a corridor tomorrow set on up. So we really have to be kind of, mindful of that potential as we're tracking things here in the Weather Center. I know, looking here at some of this information, let me see, I have a mode where I can say this. In fact, the 0Z, I had it up on 18 on earlier, but I was looking at this. This actually says it getting a little closer to Brunswick. That's something we'll see, because it may not quite set up like that, but then it might. So let me see this real quick here. And this is going to be from College of DuPage, the next lab over there. I just want to say this real quick to our viewers at home, because I think this is important here to get a handle on. Let me get it set up right. Ratio rides here. Let me see what we got. Okay, so let me go ahead and say this is going to be your significant derivative parameters at 3 o'clock tomorrow. And storm mode will play a role in how this sets up too, in terms of any type of, higher end for our area tornado threat here. As we're looking here, 3 o'clock tomorrow, 20Z, you see some values of 1. That's, still pretty noteworthy. They don't really stand out though. You see some of these oranges though, where it'd be more favorable. But then you get here, that's 4 o'clock in like Hamilton, but it could be somewhere else. It says all of a sudden a value closer to 4, which is pretty impressive here for our area, as we're looking. And then you see 5 o'clock, it says some maybe a tornado parameter. It could be somewhere, it could be east, it could be west, it could be south, it could be a little north. We'll see, but you see some values here around the Fort or Charlton. We're going into Camden counties there. You see Gilchrist in there as well, if you look close. And then that is at, let's see, 23Z. So then that gets you out there at 6 o'clock. This shows you around Gainesville, about a 2, and then about 4 around Brunswick. So yeah, we're looking at that. We're looking at our supercell composite as well. And you can see here, some of these that's a 7 on the index there. Just, not what you want to see really, but if you don't get the right parameter, the wrong parameter mixing, that can help you limit this some here. I know this is at 23Z. Let me go back a little. We'll go back. You saw they were getting red on there, which isn't what you want to see. But then the energy factor, we don't have much surface base cape now, but tomorrow, look at some of these values around here. If this were to come to fruition, instead of just very minuscule values, this shows 600 joules per kilogram here of energy at times. If that were to happen, 800 joules per kilogram here, and the wrong overlapping, that could be problematic here. Getting everything, the indices, we're looking at, but then you have the energy, and then you think about the wind and the energy together, and, storm energy from, the heating and the like, destabilization, and then wind energy and the interaction, the, overlap of those, that could be problematic here as we're looking ahead for that Sunday. But there is that thought process. The core Gulf waters, quite a bit cooler than normal, could preclude this from getting quite as high. But if the systems are so dynamic, it could still be a problematic set of circumstances here for some areas. So yeah, we're watching that very carefully here as we're tracking things here in the Weather Center. We're always trying to keep you guys informed here for our local 62 counties. It's all about protecting you, all about protecting your friends, all about protecting your family here as the situation does evolve. As Sunday gets underway here, you really just have to stay vigilant here. We're looking at all these warnings out west right now at 9:28 Central Time, and tomorrow we could have, I hope it's not 7 tornado warnings at one time in our area, but we could have a few at one time. The parameters, are not really that. There's some, ways it could be actually they're higher than what we're seeing now. And sometimes they're a little higher in the models too than what happens, but that could be because of the core Gulf, and then you still come out with something like this with a bunch of concern, at least out there toward the west. But 7 tornado warnings right now here at 9:28 Central Time on this Saturday, Valentine's Day night, where people have all these different plans they're making are wrapping up, and this is not ideal, as we're looking. But you can see here north of Grand Chenier, we have that. We have a tornado warning around Jennings, Louisiana. Communities here around Mamou in Louisiana there. You have Bunkie. I'm trying to pronounce these right. If I'm not, I apologize. Marksville, I know Alexandria. Just, obviously follow your local digital and or broadcast meteorologist here for this threat. I'll be covering our area in North Florida, South Florida tomorrow, but follow those local digital, on the different platforms like YouTube meteorologists that are covering these hyper local areas and or broadcast meteorologists, as they will give you some more insight like I'm trying to give for our North Florida and South Georgia counties. So again, just trying to keep you guys up to date on all that. You see Monroe, they're not seeing as big of a threat, but their southern counties are something that, the meteorologists there are watching, of course. And then Jackson there in Mississippi, they're just, kind of into this tornado watch just barely here as the overnight tornado threat does spread through Hattiesburg and, parts of southeast Mississippi down toward Gulfport there. And you have New Orleans in there too. So you could get another tornado watch instead of just a couple tornado watches. This may keep tornado watches, most of the way, all the way to the East Coast here now. With this setup, there may be breaks at times and things are not quite as organized. But with this many tornado warnings right now, with these spins along the line, we'll have to see, they, maintain themselves, points will get weaker, but at other points, there's, the thought process is going to get stronger here, as it gets into where some of our north central Florida counties tomorrow, especially east of Tallahassee, but still the wind energy around Tallahassee could still keep it up even if the convective available potential energy is a little bit lower in theory. So again, we're just going to have to really be mindful of that. We're going to have to really be paying attention here as we're tracking things here, as we give you guys the very latest here. And this is something I'll do, and the speeds will vary at times, but as we're looking at this, let's just check the speeds moving east at 45. This is if it kept the same movement. And it's not going to keep the same movement, at all points, of course. I'm backing it up a little just to check something. But generally, let's say it's moving east. So 45 miles an hour off toward the east. That is about 400 miles there from our western Big Bend counties. So in theory, that means 11 hours away from moving into like Liberty County, something like that, and or maybe because it's a little ahead the way the orientation of the line is. So in Georgia, that's like 350, so maybe 10 hours, maybe 8:39 a.m. it moves in toward areas. If it kept the same movement, which it might not be too far off from, based on what the timing matches up pretty quick, close with our models. But Blakely, somewhere around there. Seminole County, it could move into 8:30, 9:30. I had 9 a.m. on our forecast, so because I was a little ahead of what the model was. So it's possible if it keeps that same speed, which again, it's not going to keep continuous speed, but it could be close to the early part of that time range if that were to happen in theory. But some of these may even have different times based on different offices. To 40, 45, 50. I mean, yeah, it kind of varies some. So, we had a new warning just now out ahead with a thunderstorm warning. They're saying moving east at 45, Lake Charles. So, yeah, some of these speeds can vary on us here some. So, 45. So, as we're looking and as we're tracking things here, we're just looking here at the situation. I know we're just trying to see how that would set up. So, 45 into 350 there, that's a little bit of a quicker speed here, obviously, as we're looking and 40 into 350. So just something to kind of be mindful of here as we're looking, as we're tracking and the like here. Things can kind of get a little bit, tricky on you here, depending on how these are going. And, as we're looking at things here, so you just do the different intervals here and 400 miles, 40, that's 10 hours, 8:30. We'll just see it, may, again, not keep that continuous speed, but sometimes things can speed even faster than what the models have, which I have accounted for some, but it's possible in theory it could even get just a little bit faster than that. Let me see that graphic again for any of our audience just joining us here. I'm going to go ahead and show you look here at our timing that I have, handcrafted here. Going a little ahead of what HRR had and looking at some other models as well. 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. for Southwest Georgia, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. for Tallahassee, 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. toward like Live Oak, Lake City's probably 1 to 5 really, but Gainesville's 2 to 6. Stark, as I zoom back into that, that's 2 to 6. Zoom out again, you have 3 to 7 for Jacksonville. As we're looking, 4 to 8 to Palm Coast there. Of course, we're watching areas that maybe more between Valdosta and Brunswick, but Valdosta's 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Brunswick's 2 to 6 in terms of what we have. Like if I were to highlight an area for a higher chance of a low end, which any strong tornado is bad. Any tornado is bad, but a low end strong tornado in terms of the scientific wording per se for that. So again, as we're looking and as we're tracking things, so that's kind of the storyline right now. I think it's time to go ahead and wrap things up. Let me check one more time for any questions or comments here. As we're looking and as we're tracking things here on this Saturday night. Just be ready to take those tornado precautions tomorrow. It's very important. Interior room away from windows here. Football helmet, bicycle helmet, something like that. If you get under that tornado warning, especially if it's really looking like it's headed your way and you hear that freight train noise and it's, you're in some really serious danger. So you really got to take this serious, and you really got to be, mindful of the winds out ahead. Some of this is even going to be interacting with church times here. A lot of this service is around 11 a.m. So keep that in mind too. Sometimes you have, folks, even like elderly folks trying to come back from church. Maybe in our western areas, where you see it, if any of these start times are 12, or earlier here, maybe it's best not to go to those church services, try to watch them virtually or something like that if you can. Obviously, it's up to you, but just something like that here is something to keep in mind here as we're looking and as we're tracking things. Just have to be keeping, all the different aspects here in mind to keep people safe and informed. Have a great night. We'll be back tomorrow with special coverage. Watch on all the different platforms, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch, of course. It's all about protecting you, your friends, and your family here in the Weather Center. I'm meteorologist Casey Cloud. Try to have as good a night as you can, but we're watching things very carefully off toward the west. There's currently 5 tornado warnings at one time in Louisiana. So we're going to have to watch the, potential here as it gets closer and closer toward our area tomorrow. Stay tuned, stay safe, please stay informed here. Have multiple ways to receive those severe weather alerts.